Hi there, I am Jennifer and I'm going to take you on the Canopy Loop Trail here at Dead Horse Ranch State Park in Cottonwood, Arizona. This trail is a riparian forested area which is becoming quite rare throughout Arizona due to overdevelopment, invasive species taking over the native species, and the lowering of the groundwater table. This trail here is a 1/4 mile long. It is ADA accessible and was actually helped developed by one of our volunteers, Joan, who recently passed away this year. She was wheelchair bound and helped make this trail accessible for those who have disabilities to enjoy this beautiful canopy that is seen along the Verde River here. So we are going to head down and talk about the native species in this area and how they rely so much on this beautiful canopy. All right, here we go. So this first tree here that I'm gonna talk about is the cottonwood tree. These giant trees only live to be about 70 to 100 years old. They're very big, so people think they live much longer, but only to about 100 years old. And they are very important in the riparian area. Their deep roots help stabilize riverbanks. They help protect the banks from erosion. They are what the town of Cottonwood is actually named after. You can see they're losing their leaves here now. Being fall just about a week ago, a lot of these all fell down and the ground was covered in gold leaves. So these trees are native. They're a very important habitat for hundreds of animals that will live in here, from birds to mammals. We're gonna continue down here, and there's some geese flying overhead. We're gonna work our way down the trail here and see some other native species that help the canopy here. We have some willow trees here on our left and on our right. There are 3 types of willows in Arizona. These here are the desert willows. Along the Verde River, they are a favorite to beavers who love nibbling on those little fresh twigs that come about. We're going to work our way over here to the mesquite tree. So this here is a mesquite tree. It is a very hardy tree in the Verde Valley. You see those thorns out here in the highland desert. Trees have to be pretty hardy to survive. And mesquites have been around for millions of years. They have a rough bark and thorns that help protect them from being nibbled on by deer and other critters that live in the Verde Valley. They get beans, which don't see many on the ground here. The animals must have all ate them up, but they get bean pods that is culturally important as well as important natural resource for food for the animals here. But the Native Americans used to grind up these bean pods into a flour and make cake similar to cornbread today, but with mesquite pods. And ranchers would gather them for cattle, and they could last years and years in jars and could be used to feed livestock when grain was low. Here today we have a lot of critters that depend on these mesquite trees, so they are very important. Just about every herbivore and omnivore depend on those pods to eat, from your javelina, that's one of their main source of food for their diet this time of year, coyotes, and birds. Birds will love mesquite pods too. We'll head over to our birding area here, and we'll talk more about the birds here in the Verde Valley that depend so heavily on these trees. So we're walking through a mesquite bosque here, which is a group of mesquite trees, over to our birding area. You can see there's a lot of birds out. I don't know if you could see from the camera here. We have lots of feeders that are set up. These are put in place during our birding festival, which happens every springtime in April. They do an annual bird count. Dead Horse Ranch State Park is an international birding area. It's a special habitat that attracts quite the variety of birds here. Because of these riparian forests, they can house birds that are rare to the area. So if these forests, these native trees were to disappear, so would a lot of these birds. There is the threatened western yellow-billed cuckoo that is seen in this area. It's habitat for that. We have bald eagles here, lots of different birds of prey such as Cooper's hawks, kestrel hawks. There's gambles, quail, tons of different birds, from your ground birds to the birds of prey and songbirds that all rely on this canopy here to protect them. They provide shelter and food for so many of these animals. We'll continue on the trail now here, and I'll point out some of the dead branches that you see along the trail. So these cottonwood trees, they soak up a lot of water and they get very, very heavy, so their branches fall down quite easily. And then those branches, see more, and the dead tree limbs provide excellent habitat, not just for birds, but for small mammals such as rabbits and mice that are an important part of the ecosystem. That's a big, big link in that food chain. Also, larger mammals such as bobcats will form their home underneath those large tree limbs that have fallen down. They'll make a den under there. It's perfect cover from those branches for deer to bank down in. And those cottonwoods help another species that really needs protecting right now, and those are the bats of the Verde Valley. Bats are losing a lot of their habitat right now with overdevelopment and across the country the effects of white nose syndrome. So the more we could do to help protect the bats, the better. And that is keeping these large cottonwoods here healthy and promoting these riparian areas. They like to nest underneath that loose big bark on the trees there. And other things that like to call that bark home are tons of different insects, lizards. Those down logs over there are perfect habitat for amphibians such as the tiger salamander, because it keeps it nice and moist under there, especially after a nice rain like we had last night. All right. Well, we are just getting back to the beginning of the trail here. So I want to thank you guys for joining me on this walk. And hopefully you learned a little about the riparian forest area here in the Verde Valley and how essential it is that we protect it. Not just for us and the human cultural resources of it, but just because so many different animals depend on these trees. The river depends on these trees, the birds, the mammals, amphibians. They are a huge, important part of this ecosystem. All right, thanks guys.